Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to today's briefing. I'm Zan Ali, the CEO of Centuro Global. Today, I'm joined by Alex Schult, our brilliant content manager and the lead researcher behind our latest report on the UK skilled worker visa.
Hi everyone. Good afternoon. It's great to be here, and I'm looking forward to what I'm sure is going to be a really insightful discussion.
Great. And for those of you who are new to Centuro Global, we have built a market-leading AI-powered platform for immigration and cross-border compliance, and that's backed by expert services in global mobility and international expansion. We're here to challenge the old, outdated models. So if you are looking for a smarter, more streamlined solution, please get in touch. We're happy to talk. But today, in this briefing, we are sharing the key findings from our latest report on the skilled worker visa route and why we believe it's time for change. So we created this report because we were hearing the same concerns time and again from our clients, from global corporates to scaling UK businesses. The visa system was becoming harder to navigate, less predictable, and increasingly out of sync with the needs of the economy. So we sat down and we thought, let's dig deeper. Let's analyze the data. Let's speak to employers in a more formal way, and let's ask one big question. Is the skilled worker visa still fit for purpose? And in the next 30 minutes, we're going to break down three things. Number one, what's broken in the current system? Two, how it's directly impacting UK businesses. And three, our proposal for a smarter, future-proof alternative, which we have coined or monikered the growth visa. Now, we're streaming as a webinar, but we're also live on LinkedIn. So we've got an audience across different platforms. Please do leave questions in the relevant comments box wherever you're watching throughout, and we'll get to those at the Q&A at the end. So let's kick off. Let's start with the elephant in the room. Immigration has been a political hot potato in the UK for years now. Both the Conservatives and now the Labour government have pledged to cut net migration. They've often echoed the anti-immigration rhetoric that we see in parts of the media. I'm sure everyone remembers the Brexit campaign. One of the key promises back then was lower migration. Fast forward a decade to now, today, or in the year to June 2024, net migration hit 728,000. That's more than double the level in 2015 before the referendum. But the skilled worker visa itself, that was introduced on the 1st of December 2020, so around 5 years ago, replacing the old Tier 2 visa in a post-Brexit world. It had three clear goals. Number one, create a points-based immigration system that treats EU and non-EU citizens equally and bringing an end to freedom of movement after Brexit. Secondly, to allow UK employers to hire overseas talent for specific roles where there are genuine skills shortages. And finally, as we've kind of touched on, to retain control over immigration numbers while still allowing the economy to access needed talent. So the critical question, Alex, is has it worked?
Well, our findings in this report suggest both yes and no, in the sense that the visa route has been used far more frequently than anyone, and particularly immigration officials at the Home Office, ever expected by a much wider range of industries and for a very broad range of roles at actually quite different skill levels. And this broad application stores up some dangers given just how sensitive immigration is as a political topic. And I think it's illustrative that the visa only launched at the end of 2020. So that's only not even 4.5 years ago. And in that time, we've seen the rules changed actually on several instances. And that's been largely reactively for political purposes, done in the face of changing public sentiment. And that's clearly quite an unstable scenario that makes it hard to plan ahead, particularly if you're an employer trying to source talent for shorted roles in a tough labour market. And so when we were thinking about how we analyse the impacts of last year's particularly restrictive round of changes, we decided to kind of go back to first principles and look under the hood at the design of the skilled worker visa itself and ask ourselves the question, is it actually fit in the long run for the purpose it was intended to fulfill? And our report has concluded that the national mission for growth that we hear so much about from the government really does depend on fixing some pretty unsustainable vulnerabilities in the design of the skilled worker visa system itself.
So let's examine how the skilled worker visa currently works. It's pretty much the basics. A lot of the audience, you probably know this, but just to make sure we set the context. The skilled worker visa is the UK's primary route for businesses to hire international talent, but only if they're a licensed sponsor. To be legible, a candidate must have a UK-based job offer from a licensed sponsor, a role that meets at least regulated qualifications framework level 3, which is the equivalent to an A level, and they need to have English proficiency at B1 level. And as of April 2024, so pretty much exactly a year ago, the minimum salary was increased by nearly 50% to £38,700. So that's the minimum salary you can bring anyone in on. And on top of that, we've also seen tighter rules on bringing independents and a narrower list of legible occupations. So it's getting tougher and more expensive for companies to bring in the people that they need.
And the visa can be used for applicants in, as I said in the previous slide, a pretty wide range of sectors across different industries. And the roles that it's eligible for are determined by the Home Office's and ONS's standard occupation codes. And there's a defined subcategory within the skilled worker visa route, which is called the health and care visa, which is specifically tailored for healthcare professionals in the NHS and also people working in social and adult care, which does offer some reduced fees and exemptions. And it was on this visa route that the restriction on dependents that was enacted last year fell particularly heavily. And the number of non-health and care skilled worker visas peaked along with the rest of net migration numbers in 2023, but dropped 32% after the policy changes came in 2024. So the changes that the previous government instituted have been beginning to bite. So what are those changes? Should we take a look?
Let's take a look. So April 2024, as we kind of already touched upon, brought a wave of major changes, and really not the kind that businesses were ready for. I mean, we've seen it with our own clients. We've been, as part of this report, we surveyed a lot of companies to really see the impact. So the first change was a 48% salary hike. Now, a lot of firms had already made job offers. They'd set budgets under the old rules. And then suddenly, all sorts of firms, from small architectural studios to even global names like Deloitte, HSBC, KPMG, employers were forced to revoke graduate job offers overnight. Not only is that going to have an impact on the business, but can you imagine being the graduate who thought they'd had a job lined up in a few months, you're excited, and it was just taken away from you? And kind of adding to that, companies are now struggling to sponsor graduates or early career professionals. So that really limits their recruitment pipeline diversity, and that's a big impact. But not only was the cost felt by companies because of the salary hike, there's also the visa becoming prohibitively expensive with additional costs in relation to an immigration health surcharge, sponsor license renewal costs, and your certificate of sponsorship fees. So it's really getting expensive. And secondly, the other major change was the removal of the shortage occupation list. This list had previously acted as a vital pressure valve for roles that were genuinely hard to fill. And now it's kind of been replaced by a much narrower immigration salary list. This has left companies, from what we've heard, with a lot fewer options, even for roles where there's a clear shortage. So really, the changes aren't meeting what the market needs. And the third restriction was on dependents. This was particularly for the health and care visa holders that we're not really focusing on in our report or the briefing. But nonetheless, for skilled workers, if you're told you can't bring your family, that's a deal breaker. So it instantly makes the UK less attractive, especially when other countries might be rolling out the red carpet. So I think it's fair to say that the April 2024 reforms were more of a hammer than a scalpel. I mean, Alex, do you want to walk us through what the data tells us about this impact?
Absolutely. And we decided to go straight to the source to try and find this out. So over the second half of last year, we carried out our own quite extensive consultations with a pretty wide range of businesses. And those are typically kind of multinational corporates who are either UK based or have a significant ongoing presence in this country. And we surveyed them to find out how this change had impacted them. And our findings were pretty stark. 55% estimated that they'd been moderately to severely financially impacted by the reforms. Over a fifth said that they'd actually now be unable to fill key strategic positions in their companies, and all of the biggest users of this visa route said that they would actually have to potentially significantly dial down their use of it in the future. And it's not just the numbers that tell a story. The qualitative testimony was similarly bleak. The businesses in question, and we're talking about, aerospace engineering firms, we're talking about, fast-growing biotech companies, social media giants, science and engineering firms. So really firms at the bleeding edge of the new economy. They reported that these policies would slow down their innovation, that they'd create a kind of unwelcome and uncomfortable two-tier recruitment environment internally. And as you can see, they even complained that they felt that the UK was taking their goodwill for granted. So these are pretty worrying signals, I would say.
Yeah, I think I agree. I mean, those are some pretty damning statements from businesses on the ground. And they all point to pretty much the same underlying flaw. The skilled worker visa, as it stands, does not really distinguish between high-skilled specialist roles and more general ones. So let's break it down. You've got architects on one side, but also you can hire estate agents, engineers versus driving instructors, AI scientists versus takeaway shop managers. All are treated the same under the current system. Now, this is not about undermining any profession. Every role has value. And I think the government is absolutely right to want to upskill British workers and prioritize local talent. I mean, that's clearly a worthy goal. But the reality is, you can train someone to be a driving instructor or an estate agent relatively quickly, but you can't magic up a world-class AI engineer, architect, or biotech researcher overnight. These are globally competitive, high-demand roles, and the UK needs them now, not in a decade, because upskilling obviously takes time. Even then, it doesn't guarantee you'll have the talent in place when it matters. And if we just take a look at AI, Keir Starmer launched a blueprint earlier this year around January to make the UK a world leader in AI. And rightly so. We're currently the largest AI market in Europe, worth £230 billion. But there's a real risk. Tech Nation reports that 1 in 3 AI leaders are considering moving their headquarters abroad to markets with better talent incentives, regulations, and visa systems. So this is not just a visa issue. This is a competitiveness issue, a growth issue, a risk to the UK economy. And this one-size-fits-all approach in the current skilled worker visa design, this creates a dangerous blind spot, don't you think, Alex?
Yeah. It legally creates an equivalence between very, very different types of roles, and that's hard-coded into the visa, and that's a big risk factor, because it means that any restrictive policies become blind to the real nuances of the economy. When the government wants to crack down on companies using the migration system as the first resort of recruitment and hiring too many people for lower paid, lower skilled roles from overseas, they can't do that without inevitably harming the companies who really need to hire people for roles that have skill sets that are in genuinely short domestic supply. And that got us thinking, in the creation of this report, how many visas out of the whole really are going to the kind of high-skilled professionals that we're talking about? And so we sat down with the latest Home Office data on skilled worker visas granted since the first quarter of 2021 to find out.
Yeah, and what we did was we were kind of careful with our methodology. So we aligned our analysis with the government's own priorities. So the government has an industrial strategy. Within that, it has 8 strategic sectors that it wants to focus on. So we looked at those 8 strategic sectors. We then took the latest Home Office data, as Alex has just mentioned, and we filtered it by standard industrial and occupational codes. So this allowed us to isolate only the most skilled, qualified roles in each sector and compare those with visa numbers against known skills gaps across the economy. So Alex, please talk us through what we found.
Sure. So I'll just go slightly more into depth on the question of methodology first. So our primary data source was the Home Office's own statistics between 2021 and the final quarter of 2024 for skilled worker data issuance. And then we then, as Zan says, filter them by the standard industrial codes and then the standard occupational codes so that we could segment only the visas granted for the highest skilled professional roles in each industry. So just as an example, for clean energy, we filtered the data for all skilled worker issuance. We filtered it by the relevant industries that match that. So that would be electricity, gas, steam, and air conditioning supply, and also to some extent construction, because these require, clean energy projects require a lot of construction work. And then we went a little bit more granular into the occupation sub-major group. We're looking at kind of corporate managers and directors, as well as research, engineering, technology professionals, skilled trades, skilled metalwork. And then we cross-reference that so that we were able to contextualize the numbers that we found. We cross-reference that with official data from the Migration Advisory Committee and also some various private sector data on the sector-specific workforce skills gaps and shortages, and also the size of those workforces as a whole. So there are some limitations to this methodology, but we do believe it represents the strongest possible proxy available from the official data to tell us how many high-skilled foreign nationals there are doing strategically key roles in strategic sectors. So let's go through them in turn. And just another little note, please note that we weren't able to analyze figures for the defense industry due to a lack of quality sector-specific data, probably due to security concerns, and also that the Home Office standard industrial codes do differ slightly to the exact terminology that the government uses to name its strategic sectors. But anyway, so if we go into the sectors themselves, in advanced manufacturing, we can see that there were a little short of 11,000 visas issued over that kind of 16-quarter period to high-skilled professionals in the way that we've specified. That's only 52% of the number of skilled worker visas issued for that whole sector over this time. And it's in the context of over half of UK manufacturers experiencing skills shortages. And in clean energy, we see a similar number, around 10,384 skilled worker visas, but that's out of a 184,000 so-called green skills gaps of positions that the industry is really struggling to fill. So evidently these numbers are quite modest, and they don't really touch the sides of what's needed. And even when you see higher rates of visa issuance, those are such as with the creative industries, which were over 75,000 visas. But to put that in context, that's just over 3% of the entire workforce in that quite wide field. So in each sector, there was a very consistent story that the number of visas issued was to genuinely high-skilled professionals was not even coming anywhere close to the actual demand from these sectors for people with quite rarefied skill sets. And shall we put that in the kind of total context of immigration in the last 4 years to
Yes.
the UK?
So if we look at the numbers, you add them all up, about 180,772 skilled worker visas were issued between 2021 and 2024 to genuinely high-skilled professionals in the UK's key sectors. So if we put that into context, that's about 36% of skilled worker visas when you include health and care. If you exclude health and care workers, that's 80%, which sounds high, but it still means 1 in 5 skilled worker visas goes elsewhere. And when you look at all work routes beyond just the skilled worker route, it only accounts for 32% of all permanent work visas. So despite all the political heat around immigration, the share that's going to top-tier talent driving UK growth is only a fraction.
Indeed, and this averages out at an annual rate of just over 45k a year, which is a mere 6.2% of net migration recorded for the year ending June 2024. So that means that in theory, the government could succeed in its mission of its objective of bringing down net migration without restricting access to these kind of economically crucial roles at all.
Yeah, I think let's let that settle in. 6.2% of net migration. So you're looking at fewer than 1 in 16 migrants being the high-skilled professionals that UK businesses actually need. So the problem really is the fact that the skilled worker visa is too broad. It covers both genuinely scarce, high-skill roles, as well as more general ones that could be filled domestically. So when the government does make changes, like we saw last April, it hits everything, including the roles we should be protecting. And if more blanket restrictions come in, the UK's growth prospects will only take a bigger hit. And that's why we haven't just done a report and, put all these negative problems out there. We are presenting a smarter solution, a future-proof visa system. So Alex, over to you. Please share what our proposed solution is.
Of course. So to allow the government to fulfill the political objective of bringing down net migration, but doing so without harming key sectors of the economy which are crucial to growth, we propose that the skilled worker visa be remodeled and redesigned as a new visa, which we are calling the growth visa, which would preserve businesses' access to high-skilled talent. And our proposal has 5 key planks. The first is to delink the skilled worker visa entirely from its health and care subroute. The NHS has very different pressures to the private sector, and its workforcing needs should be administered separately. And there's the 2 visas are kind of already treated quite differently anyway, so it makes sense just to complete the process. The second would be to raise the qualification threshold for the jobs which are eligible from RQF level 3, which is equivalent to the English A level, to RQF level 6, which is equivalent to a bachelor's degree. And this would ensure that the visa is reserved for high-skilled applicants and that the public can have confidence in that fact. Now, we would also recommend case-by-case exceptions for particularly talented individuals who might lack formal degrees, but could provide validated references from senior members of their respective industries. The third plank of this is to cap future salary threshold rises by 5% at a time in order to give businesses confidence in their cost forecasts and avoid the kind of cliff edges that proved so harmful in 2024. I don't think any business wants to have a repeat of an almost overnight 48% cost hike. We would also recommend that the point system on which the skilled worker visa is administered be weighted in favour of strategic sectors outlined in the government's industrial strategy, so that priority within the visa system is given to the industries that are key to this country's growth and continued prosperity. And the fifth plank is that we would advocate that skilled workers be continued to allowed to bring dependents, because that's such an important pull factor for anybody coming to this country. But there should be systems put in place to monitor the question of their dependents' employment, as I was rather stunned to discover that actually doesn't currently exist, which means that there's a bit of a vacuum of information on this important question, which creates a gap in official knowledge of the size of the UK's workforce.
Yeah, and what we're also adding, we're proposing that this new visa route is overseen by a cross-departmental task force, not just the Home Office. So the Home Office obviously has its own goals, objectives, a lot of which focus around security and controlling the borders. However, we feel that this cross-departmental task force should bring together voices from business and trade, the Department for Business and Trade, Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, Energy Security and Net Zero, the Treasury, and crucially, not just departments within the government, but also UK employers themselves. Why? Because immigration is not just a border issue, it's an economic one. And this approach, having this work task force, would ensure that policy is shaped by both a broader range of incentives and real world needs. So this will help balance security along with growth and politics with productivity. Now, this report that we've put together, it is not just a policy paper, it's actually a call to action. And we believe that the UK's future competitiveness depends on getting the skilled worker visa right. So in this audience, if you're a UK business that struggled to hire, if you've hit visa roadblocks, or even if you're a service provider, an immigration firm, and you're looking for a better solution for your clients, we invite you all to join us, because we believe that the UK government, and Keir Starmer in particular, should take this proposal seriously. It offers a path to continue to reduce net migration, but without harming British business and actively supporting economic growth. I mean, that is exactly what this country needs right now. And if this resonates with you, we would love you to add your voice to our campaign. You can share your own experiences with the skilled worker visa. You can help us build a smarter, future-ready immigration system. So there should be a link in the comments now where you can kind of click through and sign up. We'll also send the full report to all registrants if you haven't received it already. So please keep an eye on your inbox. And special announcement, we are planning a special event at the House of Lords where we'll bring MPs into this conversation. So if you'd like to attend or get involved, again, just sign up to the campaign at that link, or feel free to message me directly. But thank you again for joining us today. We'll open the floor to any questions. If you've got questions, please leave them in the chat. I know that a few people did leave some questions in advance, so let's pull those up if there aren't any currently in the chat. Just having a look, can't see any in the chat.
Yeah, there's a question here. It says, what risks do you foresee if the government continues to tighten migration rules without refining the skilled worker route? And I'm happy to handle this one. I mean, I guess what will happen is just a repeat of the current problems that we've seen in the last year, but just intensified again. Companies will find it even harder than it is currently to hire strategically key roles. And, a lot of them will just give up on it altogether. And, that will impose a cap on their productivity, which then feeds through into a limit on the already pretty lagging productivity of the UK economy as a whole, which then leaves our country and our living standards permanently poorer. This is a doom loop, and I believe that we urgently need to break out of it. And I think that this proposal that we've put together is a very viable way of doing so. What other questions do we have that were sent in earlier?
We've got a couple others. So we've got one here. What advice would you give to employers currently relying on this visa route? Should they wait for reform or adjust now? I think that's pretty easy to answer. Don't wait. You need to adjust now. I mean, I think the reality is, Alex touched on this earlier, but visa policy is being shaped by political cycles, not just business needs. And that means uncertainty, unfortunately, is here to stay, at least in the short term. So the advice we would give is employers, you should review your workforce planning, budget for higher costs, get expert advice to stay compliant and competitive. But at the same time, don't stay silent. If this visa route is critical to your hiring strategy, speak up, join industry groups, contribute to consultations, and back campaigns like ours, right, Alex?
Absolutely. I mean, we would both urge everyone watching to sign up to our campaign, and also to share your own experiences of the difficulties you've been having navigating the current visa system. Because while you adapt in the short term, you should also do what you can to make your voice heard to help shape the long term.
Just a little comment in the chat from Ben Blackburn, who said immigration doom loop is a great name for it. So thanks for that, Ben. We have had another question earlier. So what is missing from the public conversation around immigration and skilled workers, and how can we change the narrative? It's an excellent question, whoever submitted that one. So what is missing? I think what's missing is nuance. We talk about immigration like it's one big number, but we really zoom in on the people driving growth, the engineers, the scientists, the innovators. And I think the narrative that we currently see, it needs to shift from how many people are coming to who are they and what are they contributing. And I think to change that, we need better data, better stories, and business leaders, if there's any watching now, we need you to step up to show how immigration fuels jobs, not just fills them. Okay.
I think that's all the questions that we've
We're pretty much at time anyway.
Yeah.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you to all of those who asked a question, and thank you to those of you who are thinking deeply about these issues. We hope today is just the start of the conversation. So if this resonated with you, please download our report, join the campaign, and do come along to our House of Lords event. We'd love to have you there, and we'll share more details for those who are interested. And before we do wrap up, I just want to say a big thank you to the brilliant team at Centura who have worked pretty much over the past year to make this report happen. We had a first round table with corporates last June. We've had stakeholder discussions with government and the Migration Advisory Committee. We've hosted workshops and done deep dives into data. So this was a real team effort. But I want to reserve a special thanks to Alex, who led the research and the writing, and to all of you, the clients, MPs, peers, everyone who's contributed their insights. And of course, you, the audience, thank you for being part of this conversation. So thank you, and see you next time.
See you next time, everyone.